بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا مولانا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم افتح علينا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك وعلمنا من لدنك علما ينفعنا في الدين والدنيا يا كريم. أما بعد، اللهم لا تحرمنا خير ما عندك وشر ما عندنا. Alhamdulillah, we continue inshallah to study and read the text of Sayyidina al-Imam Abu Shuja al-Asbahani, and we studied in the last few classes a few different types of a few different kinds of words that used to be considered to be divorced in the time of Jahiliyyah before Islam. In the time of Jahiliyyah before Islam. And they're not considered divorced in Islam. So we studied Ila, we studied Dihar, and then we studied Li'an, which we spoke about in detail last class. In this class, there's something that is common between different types of separation. Okay. What does separation mean? Separation doesn't mean divorce. Okay. Separation could mean death. So something that allows a person to marry someone else. It could mean death, it could mean divorce. And that is the ruling of al-iddah. Al-iddah means the waiting period. In Arabic, say al-mudda allati tatarabbasu al-mar'a. So the period where the lady waits and has patience and is not able to remarry until it's finished. Okay, this is known as al-iddah. In Islam, there are specific protocols and adab related to al-iddah. So inshallah, today we'll read about al-iddah according to the fiqh of Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala. So inshallah, if you want to talk about the definition of al-iddah, the easiest way to define it in English would be that it is the period that a woman waits to make sure her uterus is clear from any pregnancy, or it's the period where a woman waits remembering her husband who passed away. So either of these two are reasons for a person to go into al-iddah. Okay. From this definition, we can understand immediately, and we can take from this definition that iddah is two different types, and each type has its specific Islamic rulings. Okay. What would these types be? If you look at the definition, you can tell that one would be focused on making sure that there's no pregnancy. The other one is going to be something due to respect, and that's only going to happen at the time of death. So iddah is two types. Either iddah that happens because of separation in life. Separation in life includes fasq. What's fasq? What is it? Fasq was? Fasq is when the Islamic judge steps in and separates between the husband and wife. Okay? So in this case, fasq is when the husband doesn't do a normal divorce, but when they are separated. And like we said, there's only very specific cases when this can happen. It's not something that is a general rule that happens to anyone. Also, al-khula'. What's khula'? Remember? So it's basically, we say it's paid divorce. Yeah? In Shafi'i, it's paid divorce. So a lady or anyone else who pays money for the person to divorce is considered khula'. Khula'. It's type of divorce, but there's a difference in ruling. So the moment the money is paid, the separation happens, and the full separation happens because of money. If you want to marry her again, you have to marry her with the new contract. The next ruling is al-li'an. Al-li'an. What's li'an? When it's explained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and basically the husband accuses his wife of adultery by swearing. When this happens, we said they're haram forever. They're not allowed to be husband forever, even in this life or even in the next life. خلاص, there's no way they'll ever be together. When this happens, they separate. When they separate, there has to be an iddah waiting period. Okay. The next type of separation is a separation that happens because of a riddah. What riddah mean? Disbelief. So in fiqh, we haven't studied this yet. Okay, in fiqh, if one of the partners leave Islam, okay, what happens is that if they go back to Islam before a certain time, the contract is still valid. Okay, but if a certain time passes, inshallah, we'll study this in the end of fiqh, inshallah ta'ala. If it's too long, then it might lead to the marriage being ending, basically. Once the marriage ends, then there has to be separation. When separation happens, of course, there is an iddah, there's a waiting period. The second type of iddah only has one reason. Only has one reason, which is death. Now, in fiqh, if the husband passes away, that is when iddah must happen. So it's specific to the husband. There's no compulsory iddah that has to happen if the wife passes away. Okay, a husband may do that. He may decide to do an iddah, but the compulsory iddah is what the wife waits before she can marry someone else. It's not like any other separation. When the husband dies, it has to be 4 months and 10 days. When the husband dies, unlike any other separation from divorce, something it also has to wait is the 3 quru', which we'll talk about inshallah. Okay, we'll talk about the first type and then talk about the second type inshallah. So the first type, like we said, and we'll have to get into detail here, which is very normal. This type only applies to a certain wife and husband, not to anyone. Okay, some wives and husbands, they don't have to have the iddah. Okay, what are they? So this type applies to a wife whose husband, basically, his husband's sperm has entered into her, okay, in a permissible way, or has had physical intercourse. So whether they had physical intercourse or his sperm entered into her, if this is the case, the possibility of pregnancy is there. The rulings of iddah apply to her. Okay. This also applies to a wife or someone who a person thought was their wife but wasn't their wife. For example, if a person marries someone called Zainab and by accident they give him Fatima, okay, and they're intimate, and then he notices it's not Zainab, and they were intimate, the possibility of her being pregnant is there, and iddah applies. In fiqh, this is a whole section called Nikah al-Shubha, which we spoke about it before. Yes, Nikah al-Shubha. And we said, in Nikah al-Shubha, there's different rulings. So, for example, the person has to give mahar to the lady. If there's any kids that came, there would be Islamic kids. They would be related to both parents because it wasn't done out of haram. It was done out of shubha, out of misunderstanding. And many other examples. So, Nikah al-Shubha also has iddah. And one more thing I want to mention is that this type of iddah differs from this type of iddah, like we said, differs from person to person, but generally it's the same in its period or in its time. Now, it's this type of iddah differs from person to person, but it's the same in its time. What does the lady who has to be in iddah wait? She waits for a period of 3 quru'. This is mentioned in the Quran. وَالَّذِينَ So we'll stop for a minute and shut up. Okay, so this iddah, or this waiting period that we're talking about, was mentioned in the Quran, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that a lady must wait 3 qur. The word qur in Arabic is a word that has 2 different meanings. It could mean a period, meaning the bleeding period, or it could mean the clear time between bleeding period or cycles. In Arabic, there's no preference to what it means. It could mean either. And because of this, there's a huge dispute between the fuqaha. So Imam Shafi'i ta'ala has an opinion, Imam Abu Hanifa has another opinion. And according to this difference, a lot of fiqh rulings are mentioned in the books of fiqh, and this is one of the main differences in fiqh between the fuqaha. According to Imam Shafi'i, his belief is that al-qura refers to a clean time between 2 menstruational periods, or a menstruation period and a postnatal bleeding. So if a lady is divorced in a time where she's not bleeding, which is clear, okay, and she has to wait 3 clear waiting times, how would that be? So if she was divorced in a clear time, okay, then she will wait till she gets her first period, okay, and then she would get clean again. Then she would get another period, okay, then she will become clean again. Once she starts her 3rd period, then she would be separated from husband. Sorry, she would be able to remarry, and her iddah would have finished. If she was divorced while bleeding, she's bleeding, then she would only be considered out of her iddah once she starts her 4th period. Why? Because all that bleeding time wouldn't count. So she'll be bleeding, and say, for 15 days. She was divorced on the 2nd day of her bleeding. She has 14 days to wait. Then she's clear for how many days? And then she has another period. Then she's clear again. Then she has a period. She's clear again. Then she has a period. She has to wait till the beginning of her 4th period for her to be free. Now, some people don't bleed, or their bleeding has stopped, or they've never had a period. This is one of the matters where the fuqaha have used the ijtihad to find the solution. The Quran mentions that a lady who is divorced has to wait for 3 qura. And the difference between fuqaha is only what the meaning of qura is, naturally. That's it. But when we look at ladies who don't bleed, how should we judge it? What should we do? Should we wait for the rest of her life until she can't have period anymore? Or what can we do? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasn't given us a specific waiting period. So our fuqaha in the Shafi'i madhab, in the Shafi'i madhab mentioned that there's difference between these different types of ladies. And if a lady doesn't have a period, so she hasn't had it yet, either she's too young to have a period, or she never got a period in her life. She just never had it. Okay. And the same as this is the person who's known as the mutahayyira, means that she can't tell when she's clear, when she's a period. A person like this has to wait for 3 months. 3 months. If she used to have a period, but then it stopped, okay, she has to wait until the period comes back, which could be a long time, could be a few months, could be a few years. She just waits. Or she reaches the age of yas, which is where there is basically no hope in her having a period until that, which is 36 years. And then after that, her iddah will start by months, 3 months after that. So it's a very long period to wait. That's in regards to a lady who doesn't have a period. She waits 3 months. A person who had, but it stopped, this person has to wait until she reaches the sin of Ya'as, or she has a period, and then only after she reaches the sin of Ya'as, then she could start counting by months. But generally, every lady has to count by months if they don't have a period. That's it. No period, she has to count by months. The details of how to count the months is what we mentioned now. A bit of difference around that. But generally, either a lady counts by clear times or by months. And that's the only way a person can remarry in the Shafi'i madhab. Okay. Iddah because of death, the second type, okay, has nothing to do with pregnancy. So a lady who did the nikah, had a contract, but never consummated the marriage. They never were intimate together, ever in their life. Okay? She also has to have the iddah of death. Just because you did the nikah with a person, you are now connected. Okay? And no matter how long you're married, it's the same iddah. This iddah was given by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam to the Sahabiyat instead of the iddah they used to have in the time of Jahiliyyah. Before Islam, a lady had to wait 1 whole year and lock herself in a small little house and not even bath. Okay? And we'll talk about the story soon, inshallah ta'ala. So Sayyidina Sallallahu he said, it used to be a year. Now Allah ta'ala has given you 4 months and 10 days. It's not that long if you think about it. And the time of Jahiliyyah, they used to say 1 year is nothing. 1 year is nothing, they would say, out of respect to their husbands. So 4 months and 10 days is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prescribed for a lady. And it's not as severe as what Jahiliyyah said. They can still have baths, have showers, clean themselves, it's all fine. There's only a few restrictions. Basically, the restrictions are all to do with excessively beautifying yourself and dressing up. That's what is basically not allowed. Okay. Iddah because of death. So if the husband passes away. If the wife is pregnant, okay, the iddah ends when she gives birth. Okay? The iddah ends when she gives birth. And there's a long hadith that talks about this. So there's a Sahabiya whose name known as Subay'a al-Aslami. And she was married to the Sahabi Sa'ad ibn Khawd, which was one of the great Sahaba and one of the Sahaba who fought in the Battle of Badr. He died in the last Hajj. The last Hajj. So he died at the end of Islam. And his wife was pregnant. His wife was pregnant. Shortly after his death, she delivered her child. So when her postnatal bleeding stopped, she beautified herself. She dressed up so that people could come to propose for her, to see her and propose for her. And one of the people who are related to her, Abu Sanabil ibn Ba'kak in the hadith, he saw her and he got very upset. He said, don't have any hope in getting me married. You have to wait 4 months and 10 days. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prescribed. So when she said that, she put on her clothes and she went to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, asked him, and he said sallallahu alaihi wasallam that if you've given birth, you're able to marry. This hadith is narrated in the Sahih, and it was one of the stories where the Sahabiyat go and complain to Rasulullah, and then he tells them the ruling, and it becomes permissible for the rest of the ummah. For anyone who's not pregnant, the waiting period is 4 months and 10 days. which is mentioned in the Quran. Like we said, before Islam, it used to be one whole year. We'll read the story or some of the hadith related to this, inshallah, and then we'll go to the fiqh rule. So, Zainab bint Abi Salama, radiallahu anha, narrated 3 narrations regarding a lady waiting after the death of her husband. She said that she visited Habibah, the daughter of Abu Sufyan radiallahu anhu, after his death. And she asked for some yellow perfume that had saffron. And she applied it to one of the girls sitting there in order to leave the iddah. And she said, I don't want to use perfume. I have no need to use perfume. But I heard Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, it's not lawful for a woman who believes in Allah Ta'ala in the last day to observe mourning. Okay? Al-Ihdad, it's called. For one who has died for more than 3 nights, except for 4 months and 10 days in the case of a husband. So basically, from this, the Shafi'iyya, Imam Shafi'i took a ruling. He said, a lady is allowed, it's permissible for a lady, to do ihdad, to mourn anyone, as long as it doesn't go over 3 days. As for the husband, it must be 4 months and 10 days. Anyone else, she can choose. If she wants to, she can. Someone close to her died. She wants to lock herself up and be sad. It's not haram. It's fine. As long as it doesn't exceed 3 days. Okay? If it's for the husband, 4 months and 10 days. Like for the man, what's the limit for a man? No hadith say. So the Shafi'i say, there's no limit for a man. He wants to do it for a moment, for a day, for whatever it was. It's up to him. But all the hadith was specific about sahabiyat. So that is where the ruling applies. No. Zainab radiallahu anha, Zainab bint Abi Salama narrates that she visited Zainab bint Jahsh, okay, when her brother died, and she asked for some perfume to use it. And then she said, I have no need for perfume, but the Prophet ﷺ said, it is not lawful for a woman who believes in Allah on last day to observe mourning for one who has died more than 3 nights, except 4 months and 10 days in the case of the husband. Same concept. She then says, I heard my mother, Salama, say that a woman came to Rasulullah ﷺ, okay, and she said, the husband of my daughter has died, and she's suffering from sore eyes. In the Arabic, it says, Inna biha waja'un fi ayniha. Yeah? The eye aches for a little bit. So basically, what they used to do is they used to put kuhul in the eyes and it would stop it hurting. Okay? So she said, can we do it? It's not a severe pain, but she's a bit of pain in her eyes. Can we do it? Basically, she's still in the iddah. So Sayyidina Rasulullah said no. And then he said it again, he repeated it. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Every time he was asked, he says, no, no. Then he added, he explained, he says, the waiting period is 4 months and 10 days. He said, وَقَدْ كَانَتْ إِحْدَاكُنَّ فِي الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ تَرْمِي بِالْبَعْرَةِ عَلَى رَأْسِ الْحَوْضِ. What does that mean? The English translation is here. That's the Arabic hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari. She said, one of you women, in the time of Jahiliyyah before Islam, she would throw a piece of feces of an animal at the end of the year. What does that mean? So Humayd is the person who narrated the hadith from Zainab. Okay, so in this narration in Sahih Bukhari, the narrator asks the person he narrated from, who heard from the Sahabi. He said, "What does it mean when Rasulullah said they used to throw a piece of pieces at the end of the year?" He said, when the husband of a woman died, she would enter a small hafsh, which is basically a small little hay building. It's not very well, doesn't have much air in it or anything. It's very stuffy. Okay, the worst type of building I could have. And should put on shabby clothes, not touching perfume or anything else. Okay? The narration say not even having a bath for 1 whole year. And then an animal such as a donkey or a sheep or a bird would be provided for her. She would have to rub herself with the animal. The animal which she rubbed herself would usually die from the rubbing of how much smell and filth was on her. And then she would be able to leave the dwelling only after that. When she leaves, she would pick up a piece of feces and she would throw it. And she would say, basically, by throwing it, that would be the way of saying all of that is nothing, just like this is nothing. That whole year means nothing to me. My husband was much more, means a lot more to me than what I did. And then she'll be able to marry. So it's very severe what they used to do. The Prophet is telling us, in Islam, we have a moderate approach. We don't need to go to the extreme. She can take a shower, she can wash. We're taking the fiqh that she can even visit her neighbors at night time to chat, as long as she goes home and sleeps at home. She doesn't sleep outside of home. There's only certain restrictions, but she can't live a luxurious life, going out and partying and doing those things when her husband just passed away. That is not a part of the respect in Islam. That's the ruling of al-ihdad. So the meaning of ihdad is staying away from any form of fixing the body and beautifying it. Or basically mourning. In Arabic, we say ihdad. Someone dies in a country, they say al-ihdad. Yeah, they might have a holiday for 3 days, for example. That's ihdad, mourning. In fiqh, the definition is always more specific. So mourning in fiqh doesn't mean being sad or being happy. That's nothing to do with it. There's specific rulings that you have to stay away from. That's what concerns the fuqaha. That's what they care about. But what does this include and what doesn't include? So the scholars say it includes that no form of jewelry is to be worn throughout the daylight, especially if it's gold and silver, and even other types of jewelry with details mentioned in large books. But she doesn't wear jewelry throughout the day. At nighttime, it's not haram to wear jewelry because no one really puts it on nighttime, but it's disliked unless there's a need for it. Unless there's a need, it's disliked to wear jewelry at night. Okay, that's regarding jewelry on the body. Regarding furniture in the house, she can do whatever she wants. She can decorate the house, put furniture, have luxurious house. That's fine because she's not wearing it. Okay. Regarding what she covers herself with and what she wears on her body, there is specific rulings. So most of these rulings are regarding the color of what she wears. Okay. So anything that is dyed in a color that is not meant for decoration and beauty, like black, can be worn at all times, day and night, no problem. The color is meant for purposes of happiness and showing off and making things beautiful and clear. Then example of this fuqaha is yellow and red. Okay, then it cannot be worn at all. She can't wear yellow and red throughout these 4 months. It's a color that possibly could be used for beauty and it could not, like blue and green. It depends. If it's light and bright, it's a very very light blue and green, can't be worn. If it's not, it's like a dusky type and it's not very fancy, then it could be worn. She's also not allowed to oil her hair and basically apply zayt, apply oil to her hair. And then the fuqaha say she's not allowed to make her face red. Basically, that in our terms, that would be like makeup, basically. So she doesn't use makeup for 4 months and 10 days. Also, kuhul and henna also she doesn't use. She doesn't put henna. She doesn't put kuhul in her eyes. And perfume. She doesn't apply perfume. What's perfume? Perfume does not mean anything that says no. What we studied in Hajj, we said in Hajj that a lady or a man can't use perfume, and there's details we mentioned in Hajj. The same thing applies here. But if she uses soap that has smell, we said that it's not always perfume. Perfume has a specific definition in Hajj. Like we said, it's not a permissible for a lady to do this for other than the husband, or other than the husband for over 3 days. As for the husband, she must do it for the time we mentioned. The question in the group that says, can a woman who gets divorced but never consummated the marriage have a waiting period? Since it's clear she cannot be pregnant, we said in the beginning of this section that the period of ihdad is done by all wives when the husband dies. As for when the wife is divorced, but doesn't marry, then just by divorce, as we mentioned in the last class, as straight away as they're divorced, khalas, she is no longer, it's full separation. And inshallah we'll touch on that more in next class. Inshallah, we'll read the matan of Abu Shuja in regarding Iddah, and then we'll comment on it. Does anyone have the book? There's one more thing I want to comment on, which is the rulings of a lady leaving her house. Leaving her house when she's divorced, or when she's in al-iddah generally. So the scholars say that a lady who is on her iddah, she needs to stay in the house that she was divorced in, okay? Unless that house doesn't suit her level in society. If it doesn't suit her level, she can go to another house and then do the iddah there. That suits her level. If not, she stays in her house. And no one can make her leave her house for the time of the iddah, not her husband or anyone else. Okay. Now, in some cases, the wife deserves nafaqah, deserves the husband to keep on spending on her after divorce, and we'll touch on that later on, inshallah ta'ala. In that case, she's not allowed to leave her house for other than necessary reasons. If she is someone who doesn't deserve nafaqah, which I believe is probably most of many people, then she's allowed to go, and she's allowed to go out of the house and do what she needs. Basically, she can work, she can take care of herself as she needs, whenever she needs. What does she go out for? Buying food, for example, stuff like that. But she has to spend every single night in the same house. She can't leave the house. That's the minimum, is to spend the night in the house. She can't go visiting people for no reason, and even visiting her husband's grave, for example, that happens, or after. In some cases, she can go to Hajj and Umrah, and that is if she already entered the ihram before her husband passed away, or before her husband divorced. And the fuqaha say she's allowed to go to the house of her neighbor at night time to talk and to chat to her, as long as she goes home and sleeps at home. Right. We'll read, inshallah, the matan of Abu Shuja, and then we'll go back. I don't know the pages. Yes. It's page 111. 111.
The waiting period. There are two categories of women with respect to the waiting period. Number one, widows, and number two, non-widows. Widows. If If the widow is pregnant, the waiting period expires upon delivery of the child. Number 2, not pregnant. The waiting period is 4 lunar months and 10 days. Non-widows. If the non-widow is, number 1, pregnant, the waiting period expires upon delivery. 2, non-pregnant and she has menstrual periods. The waiting period is 3 periods of purity between menstruations. 3, immature or menopausal. The waiting period is 3 lunar months. If the divorce occurred before the marriage was consummated, there is no waiting period. Slave. A slave's waiting period based on 1, pregnancy is the same as that of a free woman. 2, periods of purity is 2 periods of purity, not 3. 3, months because of death is 2 lunar months and 5 nights. 4, months because of divorce is 1.5 lunar months, so it is best if she waits for 2 months. Support and maintenance. During the waiting period, housing and expenses are obligatory for the husband to provide to a woman who can be taken back. Housing without expenses is obligatory for the husband to provide to a woman who has been irrevocably divorced unless she is pregnant. Mourning. A widow must observe mourning, Iddah, which is refraining from adornment and using perfume. A widow and an irrevocably divorced woman must remain in the house, except in cases of necessity. Buying a slave girl. It is unlawful for someone assuming ownership of a slave girl to have intimate contact with her until making sure that she is not pregnant. If her waiting period is determined by 1, menstruation, it is a single menstruation. 2, months, it is just 1 lunar month. 3, delivery, it is by delivery. If the master of a slave who has born his child dies, she does the foregoing to ensure that she is not pregnant on her own. It is based on the time for a slave. Nursing. If a woman nurses a child with her milk, the child becomes akin to her own child under two conditions. A.
We won't read breastfeeding, inshallah. So we'll first finish this, then we'll get there. So, as we heard, most of the rules what we mentioned, and it's pretty straightforward. After talking about the iddah, inshallah, there's another type of waiting, which is, we could say, a smaller type of waiting or a shorter waiting, and that is known as al-istibra. Okay, what does istibra mean? Istibra means to make sure, to be careful, to basically give the check that in the okay that everything is empty and clear. What does that mean? So in some cases that don't fall under what we mentioned of the period, a lady, we just have to wait a little bit to make sure that that she's empty and there's nothing in her stomach. What are these things? For example, someone commits zina, okay? There's a period they have to wait. Okay. Also, in many other examples that were mentioned, so if the person commits zina, of course, I mean, if they're a slave, or if a slave, she's no longer a slave, or she changes into a person who is free, and all the different examples we're going to mention, there's a certain small period that they have to wait, which is known as al-istibra. Istibra is similar to iddah in some things and different things. So if istibra is related to a slave and she's pregnant, then by giving birth, the slave becomes bari and she can marry. She's free. If istibra is given to someone who has a period, then one period becomes istibra. So most ladies, just by having one period, they are clear and they're clear. If a person hasn't had a period before or they've reached the age of menopause, then 1 month is what istibra means. In 4 different cases, a person must go through istibra. Okay, what are these cases? So if a lady used to be free and turns into a slave, okay, Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what did he mention? When there was slaves who were taken in battle, you're not allowed to take them until you wait for, until you make sure that they are free. They have stomachs like that. There's nothing in their stomachs. Okay. So the master, the person who owns her, is not allowed to have any type of seek any temptation with her until he does istibra. Also, if a person used to be a slave and now is freed, there's also istibra that has to happen. And of course, this is only if there was intimacy that happened when she was a slave. Another example when istibra has to happen is when a person is a slave, but they go from owner to owner. From owner to owner. Okay? So someone used to own them, and then they sold them to someone else. The second person can't immediately be intimate with that person until they wait for a certain period and they make sure the person is empty. And the last example of a person who we have to istibra with is a person who used to be permissible to have intimacy with, and then became non-permissible and now became permissible again. How does that work? So if a person divorced his wife before being intimate and then married her again, there's that period that we have to wait, which, like I said, is 1 month or 1 period, whatever it is, where a person should wait. There's one scenario where we don't have to do istibra, but it's sunnah to do it, and that is if a person buys his own wife, used to be a slave, he buys her, okay, and he frees her. She's his wife, so she's married to him. She wasn't intimate with anyone. In Islam, if a person is married, the husband and wife, the master can't be intimate with the wife. But if he buys her, it's sunnah to do this, to wait before anything happens. Is this istibra mentioned in the book?
Under the buying a slave girl.
Yes. We read that? We read it now. Okay, alhamdulillah. So the next class, inshallah, we'll study the ahkam or the rulings of al-rada, of breastfeeding, inshallah ta'ala, and also the rulings of nafaqa, or basically paying, and who deserves to what the husband needs to pay for which wife. Today's class was very short because of few interruptions and there's a certain point I have to go to, inshallah ta'ala, but we thought we'd just touch on the main rulings of these ahkam, inshallah. Next class, inshallah, we'll inshallah ta'ala take our time and we'll go into more details, inshallah ta'ala. And any questions of this class, we can also take them next class, inshallah ta'ala. Jazakumullah khairan. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam. Wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.